Uhuru, brothers and sisters and comrades, welcome to today's live. I want to just express appreciation to the Director of Agitation and Propaganda, Comrade Sister Yeshitela Nai, for facilitating this process that we're involved in right now. But I want to talk to you today. The theme of this discussion is Democratic Party, Republican Party, our party. And this is a discussion, in many ways, is a continuum, part of what we've been talking about for a while now. We've been exploring the depth of this crisis, political, economic, social crisis, the tremendous amount of anxiety that's being experienced by the peoples throughout the world. And of course, when I say the anxiety being experienced about the peoples throughout the world, of course, in many ways, what I'm talking about is what is happening in Europe, in the white world, because most of us have been experiencing a tremendous amount of anxiety for long periods of time. I mean, who can be more anxious about existence than people in Palestine or African people throughout the continent of Africa or throughout South America, where the brigandage has been ceaseless, how the US, the Yankees have terrorized and imposed their own rule on the people there, and have overturned any attempt being made by the people to live differently. And then you look at the Middle East, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all of those places. So anxiety for much of the world has always been there, but now we see increasingly Europe and Europeans experiencing this anxiety. And it is an anxiety that's being brought home. It is an anxiety that stems in part from the economic crisis that's being experienced in the imperialist center, in the center of the empire, in the United States, in Europe. You see this happening throughout Europe and in the United States. And this is an economic crisis that's being exacerbated by the colonial virus, COVID-19, that's disrupted supply lines, has taken people out of their traditional location in the economy, and that has contributed to just really serious problems for the economies of the United States and much of Europe and the rest of the world. So when we talk about this anxiety that's being experienced today, we're talking about an anxiety now that is being made complete by being introduced to the traditional imperial powers through white power. This is part of what it is that we're looking at. And of course, as we know, most of the contradictions being experienced by peoples around the world is headquartered in the United States. So when we talk about the crisis having to do with what's occurring to people in Venezuela, throughout the Americas, Palestine, Africa, the United States is the headquarters of virtually every contradiction. The United States has been, for the longest period of time, the chief hegemon, the real ruler of the world. The world economy has been centered in the United States. Most of the political institutions, international institutions controlling the world and its resources have been centered in the United States. But today, it is very clear, people are watching a declining empire. People are seeing right before their eyes the decline of the economic and political influence of the United States. And this also is contributing to this tremendous amount of anxiety, because it's an assault on the status quo. And everybody who experiences and requires the status quo for their existence, and that includes even many poor people, many oppressed people who haven't yet learned to expect the ability to live without the white man, to live without the involvement of imperialism. So this is part of what it is that we're looking at. In the United States, we see this crisis, this anxiety, this crisis of the social system being made really manifest politically in two different arenas, more or less. And one of these arenas is the masses of people who, under the influence of African people colonizing this country, especially since the the response to the police murders that have been occurring with African people, especially after May 25th, which ironically is African Liberation Day, with the murder of George Floyd. We've seen uprisings everywhere, and they've been ceaseless. And millions of people have been thrust into political life through this process. People who've never engaged in politics, who've never gone to demonstrations, they've been thrust into political life in this process. So that's one thing that's happening. And this is a political expression, or these are political expressions that, generally speaking, not dominated or not controlled. They're only partially controlled by sectors of the ruling class, and that's more or less indirect. The other political phenomenon that we are watching and concerned with is the electoral process, the presidential election process. And this we see it represents itself in some very serious and sharp ways today as well, to the dismay of a lot of people, because there are many people who do not have any expectations of how to participate, how to advance their interests outside of the two-party process, outside of the electoral process in this country. When we talk about the electoral process in the United States, it's critical because it's not only significant to people in the United States, it has implications for occupied Palestine, for all of Africa, for Haiti, throughout the Americas, as well as people inside the United States. So this electoral process, this electoral scene is something that's being looked at, observed by people around the world. And therefore, there's the potential for providing lessons for people around the world, and especially Africans and other oppressed peoples around the world. And so this is a political a contest, if you will, happening in the United States. And the primary vehicle for this political contest inside the electoral process are the Democratic and the Republican parties. And there are many people who are totally dismayed because there is an assumption that Donald Trump will be reelected. And that's, for Africans and some other people, even some white people, the worst thing that they can imagine. And then, and this is something, this fear of a Trump reelection is what drives most African people and most people into the camp of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who are supposed to be representing in some ways an opposition to what a Trump regime would be. And then there's also the threat, increasing threat of the entire social fabric in the United States just being ripped asunder. There've been recently people who have come to conclude that there is no justice inside the United States. There's no way to stop the police murders of our people. So people have, as individuals, taken up arms and have, there've been increasing numbers of people, individuals who've shot cops. There have been growing evidence of militias, both from those who support Trump and people who call themselves left-wingers, leftists, and even a manifestation of armed militias within the African community itself. This is stuff that appears to be just getting completely out of hand. And there's a real threat, according to some of the people who are watching this process, even among the bourgeoisie, that the outcome of this election is going to bring about violence. It doesn't matter who wins. This is what they are saying. They're saying that if Trump wins this election, and they think that's, for many of them, they're skeptical about this. And of course, some of that is just wishful thinking on the part of certain liberals and certain anti-Trump forces, but they are stating the possibility that Trump is priming his base of supporters, which is a very energetic, enthusiastic base of white people, mostly. He's priming his base of supporters to be able himself, Trump, to declare victory before the write-in votes are tallied. And this is because there's an assumption that Trump has already begun to discredit the whole notion of mail-in ballots. If it's mail-in, he's already created the idea in the heads of his supporters that a mail-in ballot is going to be crooked, It's going to be something that's working to put Biden in power despite the will and aspirations of the people in this country. And so he's priming people, these white people who are part of his base, to be prepared to take to the streets and to do whatever's necessary, because he plans to proclaim victory after the first votes are tallied, regardless of what the outcome might be with the mail-in votes. And so that sector of people, they're people who, on what they call the left, concerned that that's something that's going to happen. And the Trump supporters, those forces who are in his camp, declaring that the victory for Biden will destroy America as it's always been. It means that the loss of the perceived freedoms that they have. It means that America will not be white the way it's supposed to be white and has been for so long. And so they see it as an existential crisis, just as some of the forces who are on what they call the left see it as an existential crisis. These are anti-Trumpists. This is what is being predicted by sectors of the bourgeoisie. And of course, you have to take that with a grain of salt, because when has the bourgeoisie ever told the truth about anything? And part of what it is that they are saying and doing, of course, is a part of a process to mobilize sectors of the voting population one way or another to serve their own purposes. But this is not an unrealistic proposition, as we've seen in some of the demonstrations, the protests that's happening in this country, confrontations, actual physical confrontations happening among people who come out as Trump supporters of the Republican Party, and those who are opposed to Trump, who are mostly Democrats. So generally speaking, so that's what people are looking at. So I want to just take this moment to even address this whole question of political parties, because there's this assumption that one party or the other would look out for the interests of the people. And what we are saying and what must be understood, two things. One, that the electoral process itself, there's nothing in the Bible, if you will, about elections. There's nothing that says that elections are the only way that one should pursue political power over their lives. There's nothing that says that, because if that were the case, at the time where Africans were formally, legally prohibited from voting, from participating in election, then that would have meant that we were denied any possibility for advancing our interests. And in many ways, as we know, virtually both parties factor the African vote on how to repress it or how to manipulate it in a fashion that serves the interests of different sectors of the ruling class. So the election is simply a nonviolent contest, generally speaking, nonviolent contest between different sectors of the ruling class. The ruling class is not some homogeneous entity. It is a class force that has different interests depending on the base of its resources, the capital that it acquires, achieves, whether it's in computers and electronics, or whether it's in petroleum, or whether it's in manufacturing, or what have you. You've got blocks of capital, while all of whom support the capitalist system, colonial domination of Africans and the peoples around the world. That's why you don't hear any discussion, any debate from either of the ruling parties about destroying Venezuela, about starving people in Iran or Iraq or anything like that. They're all united on that. That's why you don't hear any real meaningful discussion about Black community control of the police or anything that's fundamental that could advance the interests of African people, because they both agree on that. The difference is that they have specific kinds of interests within the context of the existing social system that each of them is pursuing. And they picked these different individuals who will be candidates, who will run, depending on, they will run a program that's in the interest of a particular sector of the ruling class. And they need to do this because they need to give the appearance of their leadership, their being in office, representing a mandate, a popular mandate, because the ruling class is a horrible minority of the population here. So they have to have the impression of representing large numbers of people And so it gets thrown on the ballot, even though the only way it got on the ballot is because somebody who raised $1 billion or more is running for office, and that $1 billion or more is coming from essentially from sectors of the ruling class. So that's how that works. And a political party simply is an organization. It's a class organization. It's an organization of a particular class that works in the interest of a particular class. It serves the interests all the time of that class, all the time. And it serves the interests of that class even when sectors of the class don't even know what their own interests are. You have sectors of the ruling class, of the bourgeoisie. They may be drunks, they may be dope addicts, they may be sex fiends, they may have all other kinds of contradictions, many of which you've begun to see recently in exposés inside the United States. But the political party represents their interests, whether they are aware of their interests or not. That's what the political party of the ruling class does. And when you look at this country, you have the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, both of which represent the ruling class. And it simply gives them a two-way approach to capturing the loyalty of different people inside this country to be able to advance the interests of white power, the interests of imperialism, the interests of world domination by the United States government. So you have that. And so you tell a political party in part by this program, what it stands for, what it's about. So many Africans find ourselves, most Africans find themselves locked in to the Democratic Party, in part because of the success of the United States government in murdering and killing revolutionaries inside this country and around the world. They killed Malcolm X, they murdered him. They murdered Martin Luther King. In 1968 alone, they killed more than 30 members of the Black Panther Party. Later on, they killed a co-founder of the African People's Socialist Party. And therefore they took most of the program of the masses of African working people and the colonized nation off of the agenda. There's nothing on any platform, any election that puts forth what Malcolm stood for, what the Panthers stood for, even what Martin Luther King stood for with his Poor People's Campaign. And certainly you won't find the program of the African People's Socialist Party that's on the ballot. That's not on the ballot. So they killed the revolutionaries and then left the African people with the choices being the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party, now 25% of the masses of people, the membership of the Democratic Party are African people. That means, effectively speaking, that the Democratic Party is the party of the African population in this country, not because it puts forth a program that speaks to our interests, our needs. It doesn't, has never done that, never will do that. But because Africans are generally afraid of what will happen if Trump is elected or the Republicans come to power, the Republican Party being characterized as the party of the white man. That's been known for decades. But the reality, of course, as you know, is that when Africans were first given the right to vote in the United States, we became Republicans, and we became Republicans because Abraham Lincoln, who supposedly freed the Africans who were enslaved in this country, was a Republican, and we were part of that. And then, of course, what happened was in the 1867 election, 1876 election in this country, the Democrats and the Republican Party made a deal that would allow the presidential candidate, Gaines around the presidency, to go into office on the condition, because there was a contested election, just like this one is suggested to be. There was a contested election. There was obvious fraud and cheating in the election. And so in 1776, when this happened, there were demonstrations in the streets. This is 11 years after the Civil War, after the country has gone to war. And now there's a possibility of this happening again because the Republicans had stolen the election. So the Republicans made a deal with the Democrats that if they would allow the Democrats would allow the Republican candidate to go into office on the condition that the Republican Party remove the federal troops out of the United States that were sent there to protect African people after the end of the Civil War and during the era that they call Reconstruction. This was called the Tilden Hayes Compromise. It was a compromise that was made behind closed door. And it opened up the door for Ku Klux Klan and various other kind of murder of African people in this country. So we were once Republicans, then the Republicans double-crossed us, and then we became Democrats. And then I don't have to go over the amount of treachery that we experienced the Democratic Party, especially throughout the South, where the Democratic Party was something that was led by Klanspersons and other forces like that. So these were the two parties. These were the choices we got. And the only reason that we're trapped in this place now is because we built a revolutionary movement subsequent to that. And the US government murdered our leaders and destroyed the program and leaving us only with the choice of going into the political party of the Democrats, the Republicans, and Africans went to the Democratic Party. That's why we're in the Democratic Party. It's not because there was something that was holy about that organization. In fact, its history has been just the opposite. But here we are clinging now because we don't have our own party. We don't have our own power. So we're clinging to this and hoping, oh God, please let a good white man get elected this time. That's the place we've been in for the longest period of time. And so, but we have to have our own political party. And we do have our own political party. It's called the African People's Socialist Party. It is a revolutionary party. It is a revolutionary party with a revolutionary theory. It is a revolutionary party with a revolutionary theory and a revolutionary program. It is something that speaks to the interests of the masses of the African working class. It is an anti-colonial party. Here's what we wrote about the African People's Socialist Party in terms of defining it. This was something that was written in 1997 at a political report to the Fourth Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. And it was reproduced in the political report, One People, One Party, One Destiny. That was the political report to the Fifth Congress of our party that was held in 2010. And what it says here, in terms of defining our party, it says the party is the leading anti-colonial force today. This is 1997. The work of our party is informed by the understanding that capitalism, the social system of the modern empire, has its origin in slavery, brigandage, and colonialism. For African and other oppressed peoples, this is what defines our current existence and what is being struggled against on every continent. The work of the African People's Socialist Party gives coherence to the struggle against imperialism, something that must be understood by the whole party and our movement. In February 1997, at the Fourth Congress of our party held in St. Petersburg, Florida, I defined the African People's Socialist Party and our significance for the African working class through the basic tenets of our theory, African internationalism. And here's the quote: "Today, in the African People's Socialist Party, the African working class has its own revolutionary party that is conscious of its mission and struggling to achieve strength and position. It is an anti-colonial party of the whole people. Our party is rooted among the toiling African masses, the African working class, which represents the most consistently revolutionary social force within current US borders. It is within the leadership, it is with the leadership of the African workers and their interests that the struggle must be waged in order to achieve a revolutionary conclusion. It is a socialist party. It is conscious of its struggle against colonialism as part and parcel of the worldwide struggle to destroy a parasitic social system built on slavery, genocide, and colonialism, and based on the private ownership and control of the world's means of production and resources by a handful of bandit states and people at the expense of the vast majority of humanity. The poverty and immiseration of African and oppressed people everywhere have their basis in this parasitic relationship. It is an internationalist party. It understands that the plight of African people in Africa and abroad is due to a process of parasitism that was imposed on most of the world by Europe. The struggle to liberate and unify Africa and its people is a crucial part of the struggle by the world's peoples to defeat parasitic imperialism. It is a revolutionary party. It realizes that African liberation and unification, the defeat of colonialism, and the victory of socialism can only come about through the total and absolute overthrow of parasitic capitalist imperialism by the working class, united with the poor peasantry and the toiling masses of the world. That's who the African People's Socialist Party is. Democratic Party, Republican Party, our party. That's our stance, that's our position. I want to say that we're not just talking, blowing smoke. After the protest is over, the question still remains what it is you're going to do. Our party has been working since 1972. We plan to govern. We're not just protesting. We're not just talking about Biden versus Trump. We plan to govern, not just here, but the African workers of the world have to come together and be organized on every place on the planet. Let me tell you what we've done in terms of, in addition to the regular congresses and plenaries and mass conventions based on a party constitution that we have, based on our line, based on the program of the party, which is the only way that you can know who the hell we are. We have a Burning Spear newspaper that's more than 50 years old that takes the ideas of the party out to the masses of people around the world. It wins friends for our party. It wins members to our party. It deepens the understanding, pride, clarity of the people around the world. There's the Uhuru radio stations that we have constructed. There's the African National Women's Organization that has an economic interest that's called Decolonize, that because we plan to govern, we want to bring women into the political process as revolutionaries, not as some bourgeois feminists coming from some place that's antagonistic to the interests of the whole African nation and the African working class. We have created the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, which has its own economic entity called Uzi Clothing, where we produce and sell clothing. This is an international People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, and it is international. It exists in various places around the world, and it is the mass front, the mass organization of the African working class. We created the African People's Solidarity Committee, which is the ability of the African working class to provide leadership for an advanced sector of the white colonial population, colonizer population, to extend the struggle for Black power into the white community, into the white world, into the bedrooms and homes and tree-lined neighborhoods of the white community of the world. And then there is an economic component here that we have created that is owned by the party, by the way, that's called Uhuru Planet Clothing Line. We created the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project, or APDEP. And through APDEP, we've created Zenzele, which is a consignment store in Huntsville, Alabama. And through APDEP, we've created Black Ankh, which is a means by which we construct our own Red Cross that serves the interests of Black people. And that's something that masses of Africans around the world are involved in. We have created economic development work, especially throughout the United States and Sierra Leone in West Africa. We have created working class centers, revolutionary working class centers and economic institutions with the Uhuru houses in St. Louis and St. Petersburg, Florida, and Oakland, California. We've created the One Africa, One Nation marketplace in Philadelphia that more than 100 families rely on for ability to achieve resources, and the whole community, much of the African community in Philadelphia and northern in the Northeast and United States are able to come and to socialize and to purchase from each other and sell to each other. We've created the African Socialist International, which is an organization because we recognized a long time ago that the African Revolution had run into its limitations when we try to fight it from just within the context of the borders that's created by white power. We're not fighting just France doesn't care a damn about the borders that's in Africa. It controls 14 different African territories that's called countries. England doesn't care about that. England is at various places throughout the continent of Africa. We don't give a damn about those borders either. So we created the African Socialist International. And we are located right now, just like Garvey, we're in France, we're in England, we're in the Netherlands, we're in Germany, we're in Belgium, we're in the Bahamas, Bermuda, Guadeloupe, Martinique. We have a bookstore in Nassau, Bahamas. We're in South Africa, Uganda, Namibia, Chad, Mali, Ghana, and Sierra Leone as some examples of your party, our party. The Democratic Party, the Republican Party, our party. And our party has to be one that is concentrated on the right and responsibility to govern, to be able to say that I know that my child will have a future, not because a good white man or a good Negro lackey is elected into office or selected and put into office, because I have that future in my own hands. And this means that you don't get a protest and the energy and the enthusiasm and the great feeling that you have after a successful protest. This is a protracted struggle. It means that you have to build everything to make this struggle happen. In South Africa, that's what we're doing. In various other places around the world, that's what we're doing. In the United States, that's what we're doing. We plan to govern. It means that you have a particular kind of organization. It is an organization that is also disciplined. It has revolutionary discipline. It has to have discipline. It means that you don't just come in and bring something out and then think that just because you showed up, that the world has just begun or the world has just stopped. It is based on a revolutionary trajectory, tactics, and strategy to win power for African people, because that's the only way we will ever know a future. So we're not Democrats, we're not Republicans, we're African internationalists. We are the African People's Socialist Party, located around the world and building strength every day. We want you to participate in this. And we're not telling you how to act on the election that's coming up in the United States, but we are telling you this, that you can make a statement. You have to come to Washington, D.C. in November. There's no telling what the hell is going to be happening in November the 6th through the 8th, because this election that's supposed to happen on the 3rd, like I'm saying, there's no telling what the outcome is going to be. There's no telling what the political terrain is going to look like, because they are suggesting all kinds of possibilities of chaos and mayhem as the two contending ruling parties fight it out among themselves. We have to define our own program, our own agenda. So in November, we're going to be with the Black is Back coalition, that our party played a primary role in organizing, pulling together, so that various organizations, various tendencies within the Black liberation movement itself can unite, at least in general terms, at least pro-independence, at least anti-imperialist kind of self-determination strategy and program. So we are saying that come to Washington, D.C. On the 7th and the 8th are going to be the critical days. The 7th is going to be the day that we have the rally in Malcolm X Park. And from there, we are going to march on the White House and have another rally across the street from the White House at Lafayette Park. And on the 8th, what we're going to do is have a conference that revolves around the national political agenda for self-determination for Black people. And that is not going to be on your ballot on the presidential election. It's on our ballot. It must be on your ballot, and you will vote by showing up to participate in this mobilization, in this conference in November, Washington, D.C., under the auspices of the Black is Back Coalition for Black is Back Coalition for Peace, Justice, and Reparation. So what I'm saying is, brothers and sisters, you can be a part of this whole movement for self-determination. We don't have to tail behind the Democrats. We don't have to fear the Republicans. We have to prepare ourselves to govern and to fight for our own liberation and fight to protect our communities, no matter what the outcome of this election is going to be. So that is the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. And you can find that Black is Back Coalition .org, and you can come to apspuhuru.org, apspuhuru.org. Brothers and sisters, I thank you for sharing this few minutes with me. I look forward to seeing you in November. It's not the Democratic Party, it's not the Republican Party, it's our party, Uhuru.